Welcome to Dialogue.
And welcome back to the deep dive.
This conversation is part of a series where we're looking critically at institutional wisdom, the series we call Trust the Experts.
And today we're focusing on an institution that, for many of us, is the very first one we encounter. Education.
Right, the experts who shape us from the very beginning. We're talking about teachers, professors, the whole apparatus of formal schooling.
For most of us, school was, well, it's the primary factory floor for shaping our entire understanding of the world, for better or worse.
And that's really the core tension we're diving into, isn't it? This irony that school is sold to us as the place where we learn how to think. But when you look at it historically and structurally, it seems it was very meticulously designed to teach us what not to question.
That's it, exactly. And that structural design is our mission today. We're trying to peel back the layers and see how these institutions, the curriculum designers, the administrators, all of it, shaped entire societies.
Not just individual students, not just our ability to do algebra.
No. This is about our predisposition toward compliance, toward hierarchy. We're looking at the source material to find those unstated lessons.
The ones that are just embedded in the very routine of schooling.
Right, the lessons that sound less like academic subjects and more like mandates. This is just how it is. This will be on the test.
And the big one, the theme of our series. Trust the experts.
Precisely.
And we should be really clear right from the start. This is not about bashing teachers. So many of them are phenomenal and fight against these very structures.
Absolutely. We're analyzing the system, the structural forces that, prioritize standardized beliefs and institutional stability over the messy, unpredictable, and frankly disruptive process of real critical thinking.
We're looking at the mechanism, not the intent of every single person inside it.
The mechanism, that's the key.
Okay, so to understand that mechanism, where do we start?
We have to go back to the original job description for mass education, back in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The first thing to get your head around is that school was never neutral.
It wasn't just a place for enlightenment.
No. I mean, we love to think of it that way, as this pure intellectual pursuit. But the sources are pretty clear that the initial design was much more functional. It was a huge project of social engineering.
Social engineering needed for what? What was happening at the time?
You had rapid industrialization, mass immigration, huge bureaucratic governments expanding. You needed solutions to manage all of that change. And chaos, really.
So it wasn't about creating free thinkers.
Not primarily. It wasn't about celebrating individuality. It was about creating cohesion. The specific objectives were, first, to standardize beliefs. You have all these people from different cultures. You need to give them one national myth, one language.
Makes sense.
Second, you needed to train reliable workers for the new factories, people who could show up on time, tolerate repetition, follow a schedule.
Okay, so a compliant workforce.
And third, you needed compliant administrators to run the whole machine, the government, the corporations. So at the end of the day, the main goal was maintaining social order and predictability.
That reframes the classroom completely. It's less of a library and more of a forge.
A cultural forge. That's a great way to put it.
So if that was the mandate, what was the first hidden lesson that system taught?
The first and most foundational lesson was about the flow of knowledge itself. And it's simple. Authority defines truth, and knowledge flows downward.
You, the student, are an empty bucket.
An empty vessel, yeah. Ready to be filled by the expert at the front of the room.
Yeah.
Your compliance was mandatory. Your curiosity, if it's straight off topic, that was a liability.
That makes a lot of practical sense from a system perspective. You can't run a standardized machine for millions if everyone is constantly debating first principles.
You can't. You need a population that just accepts the premises it's given.
And you can see how that shapes adult life, that mandatory corporate orientation you sit through in your 20s.
Oh, absolutely. If you've been trained for 16 years that the person at the podium holds the truth, you just default to deference. You don't challenge the source when your manager or some executive gets up to speak.
You're programmed to accept, not analyze.
And this brings us to the actual design of the schoolhouse itself. Because it wasn't an accident.
The architecture confirms the intent.
Completely. The model for modern schooling was explicitly borrowed from the most efficient system of the era, the factory.
That analogy is it feels a little on the nose, but it's true.
It's startlingly literal. Educators actually studied industrial efficiency models. Think about it. You had bells or horns dictating every transition. A sudden, non-negotiable shift.
50 minutes for history. Doesn't matter if you got it in 30 or needed 70, the bell rings, you move on.
Exactly. Uniform pacing for everyone. And constant surveillance. The teacher at the front, monitoring everything. It's a perfect model for creating fungible units.
Interchangeable part.
Interchangeable students who produce predictable output. It's all about instilling these deep, ingrained behavioral habits.
So if the bells and the rigid blocks of time were the tools, what was the real curriculum being taught?
The real subject was never algebra or history. It was adherence.
Adherence to the machine. Sit still. Follow instructions. Do not question the system that moves you from station A to station B. It was training you for monotonous, structured labor. It was building your endurance for boredom.
And the ripple effect of that into the modern professional world is huge.
It's massive. This factory mindset directly shaped our workplaces. Think about office politics. Who gets rewarded?
The person who shows up on time, sits quietly in the meeting, and hits their predictable metrics.
Right. Not the person who stops the whole assembly line to ask if the thing we're building is even a good idea. That person's a problem.
It's so true. The person who hits their easily quantifiable target, even if that target is counterproductive to the company's real goals, often gets the promotion.
Because they're compliant, they're predictable. That training makes real organizational change so difficult later on. You're fighting against 20 years of conditioning that taught you the safest path is the one the boss lays out for you.
So that's the structure. Let's talk about how that control was actually enforced, the philosophy behind it. Well, this is where it gets a little grim. We have to look at the historical practices. And in the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was really rooted in control and, frankly, fear. The dominant belief was that a child's will needed to be broken and molded.
So not fostering a growth mindset then.
The opposite. Educators, often drawing from religious beliefs, thought that pain created discipline, that public humiliation built character.
I must have missed that module in my last corporate leadership training.
Yeah, somehow it's fallen out of favor.
Yeah.
But for generations, this was institutionalized. The idea that the threat of physical pain or public shame was the ultimate motivator.
And for the student, that environment teaches some very clear, very brutal rules about power.
A terrifyingly simple set of rules. Rule 1, power equals correctness. The person with the cane defines reality. Rule 2, obedience equals safety. It keeps the shame and the failure away.
And rule 3.
Curiosity equals danger. Asking the wrong question, challenging the premise, that puts you at risk.
So the citizen who graduates from that system isn't just trained in academics, they're psychologically conditioned.
Conditioned to operate in a hierarchy where fear is the default. We absorb this thinking. We automatically give more weight to the opinion of a superior, a boss, a politician.
We learn that silence is a survival strategy.
The ultimate survival strategy in any institution.
Which you see in every corporate meeting room today. The elephant is in the middle of the room and everyone is pretending to take notes.
Everyone is silent. Because they learned very early on that being seen and not heard is the safest way to get ahead. Intellectual courage becomes a career liability, not an asset.
Okay, so if the goal is compliance and stability, you can't have a system based on messy critical thinking.
Absolutely not. You need a method of instruction that is simple and predictable. You need replication.
Which brings us to rote learning, memorization.
The engine of the whole system. For generations, the highest praise, the A+, the top test score, went to the student who could perfectly replicate the pre-approved information.
Let's talk about specific examples because we've all lived this. In history class, it was memorizing dates.
1492, 1776. Just the numbers, stripped of all the violence, the context, the consequences. The fact was more important than the meaning.
In math or science, it was learning the formulas.
Right, reciting the quadratic equation without having a clue what it actually represents in the real world or where it came from. You knew the replication pathway, but not the concept.
You were rewarded for speed and accuracy. Can you fill in the blank? Can you bubble in the right letter?
In civics, you memorize the 3 branches of government, but not the forces of money and power that actually influence them.
So the system was rewarding output, not internalization.
Exactly. Deep understanding is messy, it's subjective, it's impossible to grade at scale, but simple replication, that's quantifiable, that's efficient.
And it sets you up for the rest of your life to just accept information at face value.
Perfectly. When a complex government report comes out, your first instinct isn't to read it and analyze the methodology. It's to find the authoritative summary from a source you trust. Your learning process stops at reception.
Beyond the teaching methods, the system also acted as this giant sorting machine.
A massive, systematic sorting mechanism. And this might be one of its most lasting and damaging legacies.
And the sorting started early.
Incredibly early. Teachers would quickly sort children using metrics that we now know are deeply flawed and biased. Standardized tests, subjective expectations, cultural familiarity.
That last one is key. If your vocabulary and your behavior at home matched the teacher's background, you got a head start. You were labeled smart.
While a child from a different background, maybe just as intelligent, could be seen as disruptive or average simply because they didn't have that cultural fluency.
And once that label was applied, gifted, average, not college material, it was incredibly sticky.
The label didn't just describe you, it defined your path. Opportunities narrowed. The average kid was steered away from advanced math. The gifted kid got all the attention from the counselors.
And your own self-belief just calcifies around that label.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the system wasn't just reflecting the inequality that already existed in society.
It was actively cementing it. It used the tools of testing and tracking to make those early, often arbitrary judgments permanent.
And that follows you for life.
Yeah.
If a system tells you you're not college material at age 12, you internalize that. 20 years later, you don't even apply for the promotion that requires more intellectual confidence.
So if the whole system values predictability, what does it do with something like genuine creativity?
It treats it as a disruption, an inconvenience.
A bug in the system.
A bug in the system, exactly. Think about the student in math class who gets the right answer but uses a totally different method.
They get points taken off for not showing their work the right way.
Because the system valued the approved method more than the correct result. It rewards walking the prescribed path, even if a more efficient one exists.
And then there's the student who just asks why too many times.
That's not seen as curiosity, it's seen as insubordination. It slows down the lesson plan, it challenges the authority of the teacher.
So creativity gets reframed institutionally as not following instructions.
Which is just devastating.
Yeah.
And the societal takeaway from that is profound.
You learn that innovation is risky.
Innovation is risky, authority values predictability, and original thought is a problem for the hierarchy. If you spend your formative years learning that, you're going to be incredibly hesitant to stick your neck out in the workplace.
And these patterns don't just disappear after high school. They get more intense and more expensive in higher education.
They become more formalized, absolutely. The power dynamic of the professor in the lecture hall just reinforces that mandate of authority.
The classic Intro to Psych 101 course in a giant auditorium.
The architecture itself tells the story. Stadium seating, a stage, a huge gap between the podium and the students. It's designed for one-way communication.
The professor speaks, often just reading from old notes, and you write it all down.
No interruptions, no dialogue. Questioning was either discouraged or just physically impossible with 200 people in the room.
I remember that feeling. Asking a question felt like a huge risk, a performance.
And the lesson that gets drilled into you is that knowledge is received. It's a complete package handed down from the expert. It's not something you build through dialogue or debate. Your job is just to capture it and reproduce it on the exam.
And that absolutely translates into the professional world.
It shapes corporate meeting culture. The highest paid person speaks, everyone else listens and nods. It shapes how we consume political communication. We're trained to wait for the mandate from the front of the room, not to initiate a conversation.
But then there's this other, darker side to higher ed, which is this idea of gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping disguised as rigor. This is so important.
Where professors actually take pride in how many students fail their class.
Exactly. They'd boast about high failure rates or intentionally confusing material or their goal of weeding out the weak students.
Which is just bizarre when you think about it. Bragging that you're bad at your job, which is teaching.
But it wasn't seen that way. Difficulty was conflated with intelligence. The subtext was, this class is impossibly hard, so if you survive it, you must be elite.
So understanding the material became secondary to just enduring the process.
It became a suffering contest. And the credential, the degree, was the prize you got for surviving.
And the most absurd part is that you're paying a fortune for the privilege of being weeded out.
You're funding the institution that is actively trying to fail you, all to protect the perceived value and scarcity of its own credential. It's a brilliant, if cynical, business model.
So is all rigor bad? Where's the line between necessary difficulty and this kind of gatekeeping?
The line, according to the sources, is utility. Necessary rigor is about mastering complex ideas and applying them. Gatekeeping is about arbitrary difficulty.
Like what?
Grading on a curve that's designed to fail a certain percentage of students. Assigning so much rating it's physically impossible to do. Testing on tiny, irrelevant details. That's not testing knowledge. It's testing compliance.
Okay, so let's shift from the how to the what. The curriculum itself, the subjects we were taught.
Right. Because if the structure taught compliance, the content taught legitimation. The curriculum was designed to support the existing power structures.
It's a powerful tool for social engineering. You control the shared narrative of reality.
You control what the next generation accepts as normal and inevitable. And you see this nowhere more clearly than in how history was taught.
History class was about creating a national myth.
A sanitized, heroic, linear story. And it did this through very careful framing and, more importantly, convenient omissions.
Using euphemisms for violent events.
Exactly. Colonialism wasn't taught as conquest and exploitation. It was framed as exploration or settlement. It erases the violence and the people who are already there.
And labor movements, where workers fought for basic rights.
They were taught as disruptions or strikes, as problems for the economy, not as legitimate struggles for human dignity against concentrated power.
So the message is that the way things are now is the way they were always meant to be.
It's destiny. And this wasn't accidental. It was deliberate curriculum design to legitimize the state and justify the current hierarchies. If you believe the past was a clean, moral march to the present, you're much less likely to question the inequities of the present.
The same framing must apply to economics.
Oh, absolutely. The standard econ class teaches a very specific worldview.
That markets are natural, that profit equals efficiency, that growth is always good.
And it presents these ideas as objective truths, like laws of physics. But it's what they leave out that's so telling.
What are the big omissions?
Well, they often ignore or downplay the existence of monopolies, which completely break the free market model they're teaching. They ignore regulatory capture.
Where the industry basically controls the government agency that's supposed to be watching it.
The fox guarding the henhouse. And the textbook doesn't mention the fox. They also skate over labor exploitation and the idea of externalized costs.
A company polluting a river, and the public pays to clean it up.
That's a perfect example. If the goal was to teach the whole truth of economics, these omissions would be insane. But if the goal is system legitimacy,
then they're necessary. You learn how to work within the system, not how to critique it.
which brings us to civics, the class that's supposed to make us into good citizens.
But it mostly taught us the rituals, not the reality.
It taught the sanitized textbook version, how a bill becomes a law, the three branches of government, the idea that the system is fair and self-correcting.
But not the real mechanics of power.
Not the role of lobbyists who literally write the bills, not the dynamics of campaign finance, not the paralyzing effect of bureaucracy or how corporations capture policy.
So you learn how to participate symbolically, you learn to vote.
You learn to press the button. But you have no idea how to open the machine to see who built it or why it's not working. The curriculum produces compliant participants, not empowered agents of change.
So all of this, the structure, the pedagogy, the curriculum, it all seems to point back to rote learning as the core strategy.
It's the engine of the whole thing. And it's important to see it not just as a teaching technique, but as a deliberate, systemic choice.
A choice with huge benefits for the institution.
Profound benefits. It's efficient. It scales easily. It's perfectly testable with a multiple choice exam. It's controllable. And it actively punishes anyone who deviates.
And let's contrast that with critical thinking from the institution's point of view. Why is that so dangerous?
Because it's messy. It produces unscripted questions. It exposes contradictions. A student using critical thinking might ask why the curriculum omits labor history, and that challenges the teacher's authority.
It disrupts the hierarchy.
Completely. It requires time, it's unpredictable, and it might lead to the conclusion that the system itself is flawed. An army of critical thinkers would be intellectual insurgents.
So the system had a choice: predictable compliance or messy critique.
And it consistently chose predictability and stability over challenging truth.
And that choice has deep psychological effects that follow us into our adult lives.
It installs these fundamental rules in our heads. Rule 1, the right answer is more important than the right question. Rule 2, authority defines what's correct. Rule 3, success means doing what you're told.
How does that play out in the workplace for someone in their 20s or 30s?
It means they accept the status quo even when it's broken. They defer to titles, a PhD, a VP, as proof of infallibility, even when their own experience tells them something is wrong.
And they avoid risk.
They strategically avoid intellectual risk, because for 20 years, they learned that asking the disruptive question gets you penalized. So they choose predictable mediocrity over the risky chance of real innovation.
And the cumulative effect on society is stagnation.
A society that is stable, yes, but stagnant. It's perfectly optimized for the problems of a century ago, but it lacks the capacity for self-critique because that skill was systematically trained out of the population.
Of course, the classroom doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are these huge external forces shaping what happens inside.
Absolutely. Specifically, corporate and political pressure. The goals of the education system today align suspiciously well with the immediate needs of the biggest employers.
You're talking about the push for job readiness.
Exactly. After World War II especially, corporations began to heavily influence curricula to prioritize skills that were immediately useful to them.
So less focus on liberal arts, more on vocational and STEM skills.
A huge shift. The curriculum started to emphasize compliance, narrow technical skills, things you could put on a resume that are immediately quantifiable.
So the fundamental question of education changed.
It shifted from what does a human need to know to live a good life to what does industry need right now and how fast can we produce it.
And in that model, critical thinking gets dismissed.
It gets labeled impractical or too philosophical. Why waste time on history when you can learn a piece of software that generates profit on day one?
And then there's the political pressure from school boards and state governments.
Right. Curriculum decisions often have very little to do with learning science and everything to do with political agendas, cultural panics, or influential donors.
So what kids are taught becomes a reflection of the latest ideological battle among adults.
The curriculum changes with the election cycle. History gets rewritten. Economics models get swapped out. Students basically become collateral damage in adult power struggles. The focus shifts from the needs of the child to the narrative that the powerful want the child to believe.
And the tragedy here is that even though we know all this, the basic logic hasn't changed.
The logic of control persists. We have better software, but it's the same blueprint.
Standardized testing being the prime example.
Despite decades of criticism, it's still king. Why? Because it's the perfect tool for centralized control.
You teach to the test.
You teach to the test, metrics replace meaning, and creativity gets sidelined because it doesn't raise the test score. It's the same 19th century factory logic with a 21st century data dashboard built around it.
The goal is still to minimize variation and maximize predictable compliance.
Which leads to the final outcome of the whole system. A society that worships credentials.
The perpetual deferral to authority.
We are taught relentlessly that a degree equals intelligence, a title equals authority, and questioning an expert is rude or a sign of your own ignorance.
And that belief system is incredibly useful for maintaining the status quo.
It perfectly supports existing bureaucracies and hierarchies. It ensures a steady supply of compliant young professionals who defer upward and never question the fundamental assumptions of their industry or their government.
The system that created the problems ensures the people hired to fix them are unwilling to question its premises.
That's the legacy. The message is that success comes through compliance and getting the right piece of paper. And once you have it, you get to demand deference from others, and the cycle continues.
So when we boil it all down, our deep dive really reveals one essential finding. Education was never just about academics.
No, it was a primary tool of social organization. It taught us how to relate to authority, when to be silent, and how to accept the existing system as, well, as inevitable.
And the damage to our collective ability to think critically was structural, even if it wasn't the intention of every single teacher.
It was baked into the design, the architecture, the grading, the curriculum itself.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to take away.
When an education system prioritizes obedience over understanding, it doesn't create informed citizens, it creates compliant ones. And that compliance makes a society easy to manage, but it makes it incapable of solving its own deepest problems. So the next time you hear someone say, that's just how it's taught, or that's how we've always done it, I want you to pause and ask 3 deeper questions. First, who designed this rule? Second, who benefits from it staying this way? And most importantly, what fundamental questions were intentionally removed from this conversation to make this system feel stable? History shows us that rote learning maintains systems, but critical thinking challenges them. And structurally, education overwhelmingly chose a side. And as always, trust the experts.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video.